The maid refused to sleep with the billionaire CEO. What he did next shocked the whole city. He thought he could buy anything, even her. When he offered his maid $500,000 for just one night, he expected a quiet yes. But her firm no didn't just shock him. It shocked the entire city and changed both of their lives forever. Before we continue, if you enjoy touching and inspiring stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Now, let's get back to the story. It was past midnight when Elena locked the last window of the penthouse suite. The wind howled high above the skyline, carrying with it the scent of rain and something she couldn't quite name. Maybe change. Maybe trouble. She checked the time on the wall-mounted clock. 12:17 a.m., way past her shift. But Mr. Callahan had insisted she stay late. As usual, Elena sighed softly, tying back a loose strand of hair as she turned to gather her cleaning supplies. She moved with quiet precision, careful not to leave a trace behind. Years of practice had made her invisible. The perfect ghost in the mansion of the powerful. And no one was more powerful than Damien Callahan. Billionaire, tech mogul, the kind of man whose name could silence a room. He owned half the skyline of the city, and walked like he owned the other half too. But tonight he wasn't in some investor meeting or jetting off to Monaco. Tonight, he was behind her, in the dimly lit living room, sipping from a glass of bourbon, his shirt unbuttoned just enough to look effortless. "Elena," he said, his voice smooth, sharp, "you ever think about what it'd be like not to clean up after people like me?" She froze, then slowly turned around. He was leaning against the grand piano watching her. Something about his gaze felt different tonight. Less distant, too close. "I don't mind working," she said calmly, keeping her tone respectful. "It's honest." He chuckled, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "You're not like the others. They flatter. You endure." She didn't respond. She didn't like where this was going. He stepped closer, the sound of his shoes echoing against the marble. "I'll pay you $500,000, he said suddenly. "One night, with me." Elena's hands tightened around the handle of the mop. For a moment, silence hung heavy between them. Even the wind outside seemed to hush, waiting for her answer. She stared at him. This man with money to burn, used to getting whatever, whoever he wanted. This wasn't a joke. His face was calm, unreadable. "No," she said, firm, clear, like steel wrapped in velvet. Damien blinked, like the word itself didn't make sense in his world. "No?" he repeated, almost amused. "You do know how much that is, right?" "I do." She picked up her cleaning supplies. "But I'm not for sale." His smile faltered, and for the first time in years, someone walked out on Damien Callahan. The next morning the city was buzzing. "Elena Moreno, billionaire made scandal," read the headlines. Someone had overheard the offer. The details leaked faster than water through a cracked dam. Talk shows exploded. Social media was on fire. But to everyone's surprise, the public wasn't mocking her. They were praising her. She said no. Finally, a woman with dignity. Money isn't everything. Damien stared at the screen in disbelief as his own reputation began to crumble. Investors grew cautious. Boards held private meetings, and his PR team was scrambling to fix what they called the Elena problem. But he didn't feel angry. Not exactly. He felt something else. Curiosity, humiliation, respect. He remembered her eyes, unwavering, her voice, calm but firm. She didn't tremble, didn't cry. She just said no, like it was the most natural thing in the world. And somehow that quiet resistance shook him more than any boardroom battle ever had. That evening, Elena sat alone in her tiny apartment, avoiding her phone. She hadn't asked for this attention, she just wanted to be left alone. But the world had other plans. Her neighbor Rosa knocked with soup and unsolicited praise. "You're brave, Nina. I couldn't believe it. The whole city's talking about you." Elena smiled weakly, her heart heavy. "I didn't mean to cause a storm." Storms come whether we want them or not, Rosa said. What matters is how we stand in the rain. Later that night, as the rain began to fall for real, Elena stood by her small window, watching it blur the city lights. Somewhere out there, Damien Callahan was probably back to his life, unaffected. Rich men always were. She didn't know he was still in his penthouse, staring at the ceiling. Not working, not planning, just thinking. Something about her silence, her refusal, had cracked something open in him. The next day, Damien did something that shocked even his assistant, Jules. "I want her back," he said. Jules blinked. "You mean, as a maid?" "No, as a person." His voice was low, careful. "I need to apologize." Jules narrowed his eyes. "Are you sure this is about her, or your ego?" Damien didn't answer, because he wasn't sure. He had always believed power meant control, but now control had slipped through his fingers and left behind a feeling he didn't recognize. It wasn't about the rejection anymore. It was about her. It was raining again when Elena stepped off the bus. The streets glistened like glass, reflections of headlights dancing in every puddle. She pulled her jacket tighter and kept her head down. Whispers still followed her everywhere, at the bakery, on the train, even in the quiet corridors of the mansion she now avoided. She hadn't gone back since that night. She didn't plan to. The scandal had brought unwanted attention. Offers from talk shows, interviews, even a book deal, all declined. She wasn't interested in 15 minutes of fame. She just wanted her normal life back. But normal had left the moment she said no. What she didn't know was that Damien Callahan hadn't had a normal day since either. He sat in his office staring at a file on his desk. Elena Isabel Moreno, born in Mexico City, immigrated with her mother at 14, top student. Dropped out of college to support her family after her father died. Now working 2 jobs, barely sleeping, never complaining. It wasn't just her dignity that intrigued him anymore. It was her story. Damien was used to stories that ended with signatures and silence. But Elena, she was writing her own, and not even he could edit it. That's when he stood up and said the words that would leave his assistant speechless. "Cancel my meetings. I'm going to see her." Elena was helping Rosa fix a leaky faucet in the hallway when she heard footsteps behind her. Sharp, confident, familiar. She turned slowly, and there he was, Damien Callahan, in her building, soaking wet, no bodyguards, no umbrella, just him. Her heart kicked up a beat, but her face stayed calm. "What are you doing here?" He took a breath. Rain dripped from his coat. "I came to apologize." Rosa backed away silently, eyes wide. Elena crossed her arms. "You think coming here makes this better?" "No," he said. "I don't think anything can undo what I said, but I needed you to hear it from me, not a lawyer, not a press release." She stared at him, trying to decide if this was another power play. But there was something different in his eyes this time. Less arrogance, more regret, he went on. "I've spent my life assuming everyone had a price, that money could fix anything. But you reminded me that respect doesn't come with a check. You didn't respect me, Damien. You tried to buy me like a business deal." "I know." His voice cracked slightly, surprising even him. "I was wrong." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The rain filled the silence between their thoughts. Then she asked the question that had been sitting on her chest since that night. "Why me?" He hesitated. "Because you didn't look at me like the rest. You weren't afraid of me. You weren't impressed. You just saw me as a man. And I didn't know how to handle that." She looked down. He stepped closer, but not too close. "I didn't come to beg for forgiveness. I came because I realized something." "What?" "I don't want to be the kind of man people fear or admire from a distance. I want to be someone who earns respect, and maybe—" He paused, eyes softening. Maybe that starts with listening to people like you." There was something raw in his voice now, unrehearsed, unpolished, real. Elena didn't say anything. Not yet. Her heart was a storm of confusion. But then she said softly, "You need to go." Damien nodded slowly. "Okay, but I meant every word." He turned to leave. "Wait." He stopped. She handed him a towel. "You're dripping all over the hallway." He smiled, took it, and for the first time, something between them shifted. It wasn't romance. Not yet. But it was no longer anger either. It was something in between. The beginning of something unfamiliar. The next morning, a different kind of headline hit the news. Billionaire CEO seen apologizing in low-income neighborhood. Is Damien Callahan changing? Some called it a publicity stunt. Some called it weakness. But for those who really paid attention, there was a flicker of something new in his eyes during his next press appearance. He seemed humbled. He turned down a multi-million-dollar party launch donated to a domestic workers' union. And then, weeks later, did something unthinkable. He called Elena, not to beg, not to offer anything, just to ask, "Can we talk over coffee?" She nearly hung up, but something in his tone stopped her. Curious, she agreed, but only at a cafe near her job, in public, during the day. He showed up 5 minutes early. She showed up 5 minutes late, just enough to stay in control. When she sat down, he stood gently and waited until she settled before speaking. "I'm not sure why you agreed to this," he said, "but I'm glad you did." She stirred her coffee. "I want to hear what this is about and what it isn't." He nodded. "It's not about seducing you or trying again. I won't ever cross that line." "Good, because you wouldn't get a second chance." He smiled. "I believe you." She finally looked at him, really looked, and saw a man who was trying, still flawed, but trying. "Why are you really here?" she asked. He leaned in slightly. "Because I've spent years building a life so big, I forgot what it meant to live small, to be honest. You reminded me." She frowned. "You're saying I inspire you." "I'm saying I want to learn from you, if you'll let me." The honesty disarmed her. She didn't trust it, not yet. But something inside her softened just a little. "Then we talk," she said. "Nothing more. That's all I'm asking." They sipped their coffee. The city moved around them. Cars, sirens, strangers. But at that little table, something strange was beginning. Not romance, not yet, but respect. And maybe the very first spark of friendship. Over the next few weeks, their conversations became a quiet rhythm. Never rushed, never forced. Always in public, always in daylight. Sometimes at the small cafe near Elena's job, sometimes during her lunch breaks in the park. Damien never tried to impress. No limos, no designer suits, just him. Jeans, a plain shirt, and a paper cup in hand. To the world, he was still a billionaire. To Elena, he was just a man trying to understand a life he'd never lived. They spoke about small things at first. The best tamales in the city, her mother's stubborn health, his favorite childhood books, the one time he got suspended for hacking the school system. And slowly, almost unknowingly, the conversations got deeper. "What was your father like?" he asked one afternoon. Elena hesitated, looking at the birds fighting over crumbs near the bench. "He was quiet, kind. He worked 2 jobs, taught me how to fix a leaky faucet and say no without raising my voice." Damien smiled faintly. "That last one you're pretty good at." She shot him a look, half amused. "Yeah, well, not everyone listens." He nodded, thoughtful. "I'm trying." She glanced at him. "I know." And he was. More than she expected. At the company, changes started showing. Employees whispered about the new policies, better health coverage, anonymous HR reporting, flexible schedules for single parents. Most didn't believe Damien was behind it. But he was. Quietly. Deliberately. "Why are you doing all this?" Elena asked one day, leaning on the cafe counter where she now picked up weekend shifts. He shrugged. "Because the people who clean our offices, raise our kids, serve our food, they deserve more. You made that clear." She studied him. "You didn't have to listen." "I needed to." But not everyone saw this change as noble. Whispers began to circulate in boardrooms and executive lounges. Some of his partners were growing nervous. One of them, Malcolm Voss, old money, old mind, paid him a visit. "You've been distracted, Damien," Malcolm said, swirling his drink in Damien's penthouse. "People talk." "I'm aware. They say you've gone soft." Damien looked out the window, the city sprawling below. "Maybe I've just started seeing clearly." Malcolm chuckled darkly. "Over a maid?" Damien turned slowly. "She has a name." There was steel in his voice. Malcolm raised an eyebrow. "You're risking your company's image." "If the image was built on arrogance and fear, maybe it needs to break." Malcolm leaned forward. "She humiliated you, Damien, and now she's reaping sympathy points. Be careful, that kind of attention doesn't stay innocent for long." But Damien didn't respond, because deep down he knew the truth. He had been humiliated, and it was the best thing that ever happened to him. One evening, as the sky turned a deep purple, Elena got a call. "Hey," Damien's voice came through softer than usual. Would you come to my mother's foundation gala?" She nearly dropped her phone. "What?" "It's formal, big, you wouldn't be cleaning, you'd be my guest." She stared at the wall. "Why?" she asked. He hesitated. "Because the person I respect most right now deserves to be seen." Her heart fluttered, not with romance, but with something more dangerous. "Hope!" She cleared her throat. "I don't have a dress for something like that." "I'll handle it, no strings." "No trying anything?" "Promise." After a long silence, she exhaled. "Fine. But if I get even a whiff of pity, you won't." The night of the gala, Damien waited by the car, adjusting his cuffs. When Elena stepped out of the building, everything around him slowed. She wore a simple navy gown, not flashy, not dramatic, but somehow stunning. And more than that, she wore it with dignity, not like someone entering his world, like someone who'd always belonged in it and just never needed permission. He opened the door for her. She gave him a look. "I can open my own door." He smiled. "I know, but I wanted to." The gala was grand. Crystal chandeliers, laughter bouncing off the marble, the city's elite in their usual glitter and gold. Heads turned when they walked in together, some in surprise, some in disapproval, and one camera flash, one single photo, was enough to ignite a firestorm by morning. Elena Moreno, from housekeeper to CEO's date? Is this redemption or romance? Callahan's latest scandal, or love story? The backlash was instant, not from the public, but from those who felt threatened, and the person who hated it most was someone very close to Damien. Claire Hammond, his ex, socialite, PR specialist, cold as diamonds and twice as sharp. She stormed into his office without knocking. "You're destroying everything we built, Damien." He looked up from his desk. "We didn't build anything." "I did." "Don't play noble," she snapped. "This girl? She's using you. You think it's love, but it's revenge. You humiliated her and now she's milking it." "She hasn't asked me for a single thing," Claire sneered. "She won't need to. Public opinion is already shifting. And the board is watching. Let them watch." Claire leaned in, venom in her voice. "This won't end well. She'll ruin you." Damien stood, calm, steady. "You're wrong." But somewhere inside, a tiny crack formed, because love, if that's what this was becoming, didn't live in quiet conversations forever. Eventually, it had to face the noise. And the noise was only getting louder. The day after the gala, Elena's life changed. Again. Her phone didn't stop buzzing. News outlets wanted statements. Gossip accounts flooded her inbox with questions disguised as compliments. Strangers followed her at the market, whispering like she couldn't hear them. Her world, once simple and quiet, had become a circus. And at the center of it was Damian Callahan. She stood at her mother's kitchen sink, washing dishes slowly, watching the news play in the background. Damian Callahan's mystery date finally speaks? Is Elena Moreno the next Cinderella or a calculated threat? Her mother, Lucia, turned off the TV with a sigh. This is not your life, mija. These people, they eat stories like yours. I didn't ask for this, Elena muttered. I know, but they don't care. Elena dried her hands, her shoulders tight with something between anger and sadness. I thought people would be proud, that I stood up for myself, that I didn't take the money. They were, for a moment. Her mother touched her hand. But the world loves a clean beginning, not a messy middle. Meanwhile, Damian sat in his office, the buzz of tension behind every closed door. The board had called an emergency meeting, not about profits, not about projections, about Elena. You've tied your image to a woman who publicly rejected you, embarrassed the company, and now walks red carpets like she owns the place, one executive sneered. Damian stayed calm. She didn't ask for attention. We gave it to her. You gave it to her, another corrected. This was a personal decision with public consequences. Another added coldly, we're recommending a formal review of your conduct. Damian's jaw tightened. For what? Being seen in public with someone who challenges me to be better? This isn't about your heart, Damian. It's about shareholders. And you're losing them. He stood, voice cool but firm. Then, maybe they're the wrong shareholders. He left the room before they could speak again. His hands shook slightly as he entered the elevator, because despite his confidence, he knew they weren't bluffing. He was risking everything. That night, Elena found a note slipped under her apartment door. No name, just 7 words, scribbled in rough handwriting. Careful who you trust. He isn't clean. She stared at the paper, her heart thudding. Who wrote it? A neighbor? A stranger? Claire? Her phone buzzed again. Another unknown number, another invasive message. She turned it off. Then she turned off the lights, sat on her couch in the dark, and let the silence wrap around her like a shield. What was she doing? She hadn't agreed to date Damian, hadn't kissed him, hadn't even touched his hand. And yet, somehow she was being treated like she belonged to him, like she'd chosen this path when all she ever did was tell the truth. No, she whispered into the dark. I'm not going to be someone's story. The next day, she showed up at Damian's office unannounced. His assistant, Jules, blinked in surprise. Elena, I didn't expect. I need to speak to him. Jewel nodded and led her inside. Damian looked up, surprised, then concerned. Hey, are you okay? She walked straight to his desk. This has gone too far. He stood. I know, I'm trying to fix it. I don't want you to fix it. Her voice was calm but firm. I want to understand what this is. He paused. You mean us? There is no us, Damian. Not really. Not yet. And I'm not mad at you. But I need to know something. He waited. Is any of this real? He stepped around the desk slowly, his expression open, raw. Yes. Are you trying to win me over? Or just prove something to yourself? I was, he admitted. At first, maybe I just wanted to make it right. But then I started seeing you, and I couldn't look away. She looked down. This feels like a dream I didn't ask for. I don't want you to feel trapped. Then prove I'm not. He frowned. How? Let me go. Damian flinched visibly. Let me walk away. From this, from the cameras, from you, and don't follow me. He looked at her, torn. And if I say yes, then maybe someday I'll come back on my own. The silence that followed felt longer than it was. Then he nodded. Okay. That night, Elena packed a small bag and took a bus out of the city. She left behind the apartment, the headlines, the noise. She stayed with an old friend 2 towns over, in a place with no paparazzi, no tabloids, no glitter, just quiet and space to think. For the first time in months, she woke without dread. And when she did, she realized something had shifted inside her. Not just anger or fear, but grief, for the version of herself she lost, and maybe for the version of Damien she was starting to care about. Back in the city, Damien sat alone on the balcony of his penthouse, the skyline blinking like a memory. He didn't call her, didn't text, didn't chase, because for the first time in his life, he understood that love wasn't pursuit. It was permission, and respect meant waiting, even if it broke you. 3 weeks passed. The city moved on, as cities always do. New scandals replaced old ones. Headlines changed. But for Damien, time didn't blur anything. Every morning he still made 2 coffees. Only one got cold. Jules noticed the shift. Damien still worked, still showed up, but with a quietness that hadn't been there before. He'd stopped checking the news, stopped answering questions about the girl, because deep down he knew she wasn't the girl. She was the choice, and she had made hers. Meanwhile, 2 towns away, Elena spent her mornings helping at a local bookstore, her afternoons volunteering at a school for immigrant kids. The peace settled her, slowed her thoughts, but it didn't erase the ache. Every time the bell above the door rang, her heart hoped it was him, and hated itself for hoping. Then one afternoon, her friend Mila handed her an envelope. "No return address," Mila said. "Looks personal." Elena opened it, cautious. Inside was a photograph, faded, folded gently. It was the piano in Damien's penthouse, with a note taped to the keys. Still waiting for the music. No name, no pressure, just presence. She stared at it for a long time, and without realizing it, smiled. Back in the city, Damien sat in a small community board meeting, not a tech conference, not a gala. A room of everyday workers talking about housing issues, healthcare struggles, and long shifts. He didn't speak, just listened. One of the women, a janitor named Miriam, glanced at him. "You're him, right? The rich guy with the scandal?" He met her eyes. "Yeah, that's me." "You don't look like the photos." "That's probably a good thing." She studied him. "You staying for the next meeting?" He nodded. "If you'll have me." Her lips twitched. "Well, bring snacks next time. We like people who bring snacks." He chuckled. "Noted." That evening, Elena packed a bag. Again. But this time, it wasn't to escape. It was to decide. Not out of pressure, but out of peace. She took the late bus, watched the city lights grow closer like stars drawing near. And when she stepped off at the old downtown terminal, the air smelled familiar. But she felt different. She wasn't the same girl who had left. Now, she was someone who'd found her voice, and she was ready to use it, wherever it led. Damien was locking up his office when he saw her, standing by the glass doors, hair tied back, bag slung over one shoulder. He froze. She didn't smile, she just looked at him. "Hi." He opened the door, slowly. "Hi." They stared at each other for a moment, suspended between all the words left unsaid. Then she spoke. "I didn't come back for you." He nodded. "I came back for me," she said, "because I don't want to run from things that are hard. I've done that enough." He waited. "But I still need to know." Her voice softened. "Have you changed because of me? Or for me?" He stepped closer. "I changed because I saw the world through your eyes," he said. "And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it." She studied him, not just the man in front of her, but the space between who he'd been and who he was now. And for the first time, she took a step forward, not toward a fantasy, but toward a possibility. They walked together that night, through the quiet streets, past the corners where the city used to whisper about them. Now, it didn't matter what the city said, because for once neither of them needed the world's permission to feel something real. They stopped near the river. "I don't know where this goes," Elena said. "I'm not promising anything." Damien nodded. "I'm not asking you to, but I'm willing to try," she added. "If we keep it honest, equal, no fairy tales." "No castles," he agreed, "just small steps." She looked at him, then, finally, reached for his hand. It was the smallest gesture, but it meant everything. The next morning, the city woke to another headline. Callahan Foundation to launch housing program for domestic workers. No pictures, no scandals, just action. And at the launch event, while Damien gave a brief speech, Elena stood in the crowd, not behind him, not beside him, but in her own space, as herself, whole, free, and finally seen. For a while things felt quiet, not perfect, not dreamy, but real. Elena and Damien moved carefully, like two people rebuilding trust, one honest moment at a time. There were no late-night confessions or sweeping gestures. Instead, it was coffee before work, long walks without cameras, conversations that didn't always end with answers, but never ended with silence. Still, not everyone liked this new version of Damien Callahan, especially not the ones who benefited from the old one, and one of them wasn't done yet. Claire Hammond watched the live stream of the housing initiative from her office, a glass of wine in one hand, a cold smile on her face. She knew Damien better than anyone. He was playing the long game, whether he admitted it or not. But Elena? She was just the latest pawn. And Claire hated losing to a pawn, so she made a call. "I need you to pull everything you can on Elena Moreno. School records, work history, immigration status, anything with teeth." The voice on the other end hesitated. "Claire, that's not... Just do it, and start with her father." A few days later, Elena got a call that turned her blood to ice.
"Miss Moreno?"
The voice was unfamiliar.
"This is Officer Reyes from the Department of Immigration Services. We've received an anonymous tip regarding your late father's work history and your family's naturalization process."
She gripped the phone.
"What kind of tip?"
"We need you to come in for an interview." The line went quiet. She sat frozen, the air knocked from her lungs. That old fear, the one buried for years, came roaring back. She knew the process had been difficult, long, messy. Her father had done everything he could to keep them here legally, but the paperwork had been complicated. Some things incomplete. And now someone was digging it up, someone who wanted to hurt her. Damien found her that evening on the rooftop of her apartment building, arms crossed, eyes full of wind and worry. "What happened?" he asked, seeing her face. She didn't speak right away. Then, finally, "They're investigating my father, our papers. Someone tipped them off." He stepped closer. "Elena," she turned to face him. "I know it was her." "Claire?" She nodded. "She's trying to break us. And you know what the worst part is? It's working." "No, it's not." "It is," she said, voice cracking. "This isn't just about gossip anymore. This is my family. My father is gone, and he still can't rest because someone wants to prove I don't belong." He reached for her hand. She pulled back. "I can't let you fix this." "I'm not trying to fix it," Damien said quietly. "I'm trying to stand with you." "I don't want to be your redemption arc, Damien." "You're not. I'm not your cause, your lesson, or your guilt. I'm a woman trying to protect what's left of her family's name." He nodded. "Then let me help. Not because you need me, but because I need to be someone who stands on the right side of things, even when it's hard." She looked at him, eyes full of storms, and for the first time, she didn't push him away. The next day, Damien called a press conference. No PR team, no prepared speech, just him. Standing in front of cameras, with Elena watching from the back. "I want to speak directly about the ongoing attacks on someone I care about," he began. A woman who has faced more with grace than I ever did with privilege." Flashes went off. He continued. "Some people are trying to weaponize her past, her family, her identity, because they can't stand that the world is changing. That voices once silenced are now being heard." He looked into the camera. "I will not let those people speak louder than the truth. Elena Moreno is not just the woman who said no to me. She is the woman who taught me how to say yes. To compassion, to equity, to decency." The room was silent. "I will cooperate fully with any investigation, but if you want to come after someone, come after me. Leave her family out of this." He stepped down. Didn't smile, didn't bow. Just walked straight out, to where Elena stood, waiting. This time it was her who took his hand, and didn't let go. Later that night, she sat beside him on the floor of his living room, not in a dress, not in silence, but in her worn-out jeans, sharing takeout straight from the containers. "Why do you look so calm?" she asked. "Because I know something now." "What?" "That the strongest people in this world aren't the ones with money. They're the ones who keep going after being told they shouldn't even be here." She leaned back quietly. Then, "My father once told me, if they ever try to break you, make sure they only break your silence, not your spirit." Damien looked at her. "You've done both." The investigation hit a wall. No wrongdoing was found. Elena's record and her father's were clean. But the attempt made headlines. And this time, the city didn't turn on her. It turned with her. Protest signs popped up. "Let her stay." "We are Elena." "Truth can't be deported." And Claire? She disappeared from the spotlight entirely, because sometimes, the louder the lie, the harder it falls. The city had changed, or maybe it had just woken up. Billboards still flashed tech ads and luxury brands, but now, on subway walls and cafe napkins, in student notebooks and workplace chatter, there was a different kind of story being told. It wasn't about scandal anymore. It was about respect, about a woman who said no and meant it, about a man who listened and changed. And together, they had done something no PR campaign ever could. They made people believe that dignity mattered more than dollars. Months had passed since the storm. The headlines had quieted. The protests had turned into programs, and Elena had returned to her life. But not the one she left behind. She no longer worked as a maid, not because she was ashamed of it, but because she had grown beyond it. Now, she was the director of community development for the Callahan Foundation, the very organization she once cleaned for. Her first proposal? A grant program for domestic workers seeking education. Her second, free legal assistance for immigrant families navigating citizenship. And Damien? He never stood in front of her, only beside. He stopped asking, "How do I fix this?" and started asking, how can I help? He sold 2 properties, cut ties with investors who prioritized image over integrity. And most shocking of all, he began mentoring young entrepreneurs from underserved neighborhoods, quietly, without fanfare. When someone once asked him if he did it for Elena, he said, "No, I did it because of her." There's a difference. But even with peace returning, there was one thing left unsaid between them. One thing hanging in the air like a note waiting to be played. They had built trust, partnership, friendship. But was it love? Or just something that looked like it? They never rushed to answer it. Until one evening, under a soft orange sky, Elena invited Damien to the same rooftop where she once told him to let her go. He arrived, breath visible in the autumn air. She was already waiting, a blanket draped over her shoulders, 2 mugs of hot chocolate in her hands. He smiled. "Is this a setup?" She handed him a mug. "You'll survive." They sat on the ledge, legs dangling above the city. For a while they just watched, taxis below, laughter echoing from a nearby balcony, life pulsing steadily through the streets they both now saw differently. Then she spoke. When I met you, I thought you were the worst kind of man." He chuckled, nodding. "I was. You treated people like things. You asked for things you hadn't earned." He nodded again. "But then—" She paused, glancing at him. "You surprised me, not by apologizing. Anyone can do that. You surprised me by changing when no one was watching." He didn't say anything, just looked at her fully. "I didn't come here to give you an answer," she added, "because this isn't a fairy tale. There's no magic ending." He nodded slowly. "I don't need a fairy tale. But," she said, "if I'm going to love someone, it has to be someone who sees me, stands with me, and doesn't flinch when I say no." Damien's voice was low. "Then I hope you keep saying no, because every time you do, you teach me something." She smiled. That quiet, unmistakable smile he had waited months to see again. Then finally, she whispered, "This time, though, I'm saying yes." His eyes softened. "To what?" She leaned in, pressing her forehead lightly against his. "To seeing where this goes." He closed his eyes, and in that moment, there were no contracts, no expectations, no cameras. Just two people who had been broken, rebuilt, and found in each other not rescue, but recognition. He kissed her gently, not like a man claiming something, but like a man receiving something precious. And for the first time, Damien Callahan, billionaire, CEO, survivor of scandal, understood what it meant to belong. 1 year later, the Callahan Foundation opened a new center. Not named after Damien, not branded, just called the Elena Project. A place for those who've been silenced, overlooked, or underestimated to find voice, power, and opportunity. At the ribbon cutting, Elena stood at the microphone. No heels, no designer dress, just her. "Some people say this started with a no." She smiled. "But really it started with a decision to never let anyone decide who you're allowed to be." The crowd applauded. Damien stood beside her, clapping like everyone else, not as her boss, not even as her boyfriend, but as someone finally proud of the man he'd become. Because in the end, the greatest power isn't money. It's choosing who you are, no matter who's watching. And sometimes, the most life-changing love story starts with a rejection and ends with respect. The end. Now I want to ask you, have you ever said no to something, only to realize later it was the moment that changed your life? I'd love to hear your story in the comments.